So today we're building a responsive navbar in Nextjs using only Tailwind CSS. Our responsive navbar will consist of three main components: a logo, the menu links, and action items. The logo will simply be an image wrapped in a link tag that will redirect back to the home page. The menu links will represent additional pages that will be set up within our Nextjs app. Right now we're on the home page, but eventually we'll make an about and a contact. And then finally we have our action items showing a cart, username, and quantity in the cart. Our application also has a mobile menu capability wherein if we click it, it displays the menu links on a background and the menu icon transitions to a X. And if we click the X, we notice that it transitions back to a menu and the nav links or menu links disappear. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into coding this application. So let's add in one additional dependency for our navbar, and that is the React icons. So let's in our terminal, let's open up a new terminal and cd into the directory that's holding the project. And inside of it, we'll type in the command npm I react-icons and press enter. And once it's finished installing, we can go ahead and set up our navbar. So inside of our navbar, let's start with a few imports. First will be use state. This will help manage the state of our mobile menu. Next will be link from next link. This will help with client-side navigation. We'll need to bring in some React icons next. We're going to use the shopping cart, the bars and times, which is the menu open, and the X for the menu close. We'll need image from next image. This is because we're going to have a logo that will be held in next image. And with that, let's go ahead and bring in our logo now. So we'll say import. And what I have is I have my logo listed here in the public directory. Feel free to add one in as well. So we'll import and we'll call it logo. And we'll say this is from /public/logo.png. And the final import we'll need is the box component. So we'll need to create our box component before we import it. So in the box.js file, let's start by creating the React functional component. And we'll need to pass in some props because this will be a reusable component. We're going to pass in the children and class name. And in the return statement, we'll have a div. And our div class name, we're going to start with the temporal literal. And in it, we'll give the width of full. We want the max width to be 1280 pixels. That way the content is within that parameter. We want to give some padding on the x-axis and set the margin to auto. And we'll conditionally render that if we don't get anything in, we want to just pass in a blank class name. But we know we just won't use it if it's not being utilized. And then inside of this div, we want to pass in children. So if we save the file and go back to our navbar.js, let's import the box from /box. And that will care for all of the imports that we'll need for our navbar. Now let's bring in some additional functions to bring some activity to our header. First, inside of the navbar function, let's start by creating a state variable for our mobile menu. We're going to set the initial state to false, but this is basically what's going to be used to manage the state of our mobile menu. Then we'll create our menu links. These links will go on the navbar and represent the pages. So we'll have a home page, an about page, a contact page, and we're also going to have a product detail page, but we'll create that off of a product item. And then the last functionality or function that we want to create or add here is a toggle mobile menu. This function will just update the mobile menu state to toggle it from false to true. Okay, so now we are ready to move on to our JSX. So in the header, let's give it a class name, and we want to set the width to full. We want the text to be a primary color. We want the Z index to be 20, and we want it to be sticky up top. This will give us access to our navbar regardless to where we are within the page. So if you scroll down the page, you'll still have access to the navbar menu links. Now within the header, we want to bring in or use the box component. This way our menu or header or navbar, I should say, will be contained within the box, will be contained within the parameters of the box component. And then inside of box, we know it takes in props, so we have to pass in a class name. And we want to set the height to 100 pixels. We want the direction to be flex. We want to give space between each div or each component of our navbar. We want the item centered, and we want to give padding on the x-axis. So the first component we want to add in is our logo, and our logo is going to be wrapped in a link tag. So we'll start by creating the link first. Our link will need an href, and we want to direct it back to the home page. We want to give it a class name for some styling. Setting the width property is the main thing we want to do, and set it to 120 pixels. Within our link tag, we want to bring in the image component from Next, and we want to set the height and the width to 200, and we're going to set the src to the logo that we imported. And if we save the file, we'll see that we now have our logo displayed here. So the next section we want to add is the menu links or menu items that we have here. So we're going to place these outside or underneath the closing link tag, and we'll start with the div, and we'll give the div a class name, and we want this to be hidden, and we're coding this for so we want the state of this to be hidden on small devices, but on medium devices and larger, we want the menu links or menu items to be presented in the middle of our navbar. So we'll set the direction to flex, and we want to give each menu item some space on the x-axis. So now we'll need to utilize some JavaScript in order to map over each link. We're going to call each item in that array link, and for each link we're also going to give it an index. We want to create a link, and we want to give it a key of index, and we want the href to be set to the link so that it goes to this URL. And then we also want to give it a class name, and basically this class name is just going to give the menu links some styling when we hover over it. That way you know that we've hovered. And inside of the link, we want the text to show up as the link text. And if we save the file, let's go ahead and add a cursor pointer here as well. So we won't see this right now because the menu is in the web page is in the mobile state. But we'll take a look at it in just a moment. Now the next section we want to add is the action section, and this is where our cart icon with the quantity and username will be. So underneath the closing div that we just had or added, let's add another div, and in it let's give it a class name of flex, and let's center the items and give some space on the x-axis. Next we'll add a span, and in the span we'll give it a class name, and we want to set this one to relative because we're going to have a positioning of absolute in just a moment. And inside of this span we want to give it a shopping cart, and if we save our file we see the shopping cart appears there on the screen. And within the same span we're going to have another span. This span is going to have the number of items within the cart. I'm going to hard code the number 3 just so we can have something visual for right now, but this will eventually be dynamically passed. And for styling, we'll give it a position of absolute. That way we can specifically state where we want this item to be placed, and then we'll position it to the top right. We'll give it a background color of gray, set the text color, give it some background padding, set the width and height of it, and make sure that we center the items on the X and Y axis. So if we save this, we'll see that it now appears slightly above the cart. Outside of the closing span, we want to add another span. This one is going to represent the username. We're going to hard code it for right now. So we'll give it a class name, and we'll just set the cursor to pointer, and within it we'll just pass in username. So if you save the file, you should now see that we have the cart and username here on our window. Now we'll need to add our mobile menu. So underneath this closing div, let's add another div, and we'll give it a class name of hidden because this only needs to appear on smaller devices. And we'll give inside of the div, we'll pass in a button. This button is going to have the on-click handler that's going to toggle the mobile menu function that we created so that it can update the state. And within the button, we want to access or utilize some JavaScript to conditionally render the mobile menu or X icon depending upon the state. We save this file, we'll see that the menu now appears, and if we click the button, we see that it toggles from the menu hamburger icon to the X. So the last section to our navbar is the mobile menu items. We need to conditionally render these. So underneath the closing box tag, this can be presented, or the code can be added outside of the box. Let's add in some JavaScript, and we want to conditionally render if we're in the mobile menu, or if it's the mobile menu, we want to present a div. And basically what we have here is we want the background to be our primary color. We want the text that the items that will be on to be white, and we want some padding and space on the y-axis. And then we want to use JavaScript to loop over the menu links, and we want to use the map function. We'll name them the same way we did here earlier, and in it we want to pass in link. We'll give it a key with the index, or index with key. The href will be set back to the link, and in it we'll give it a class name just to give it some styling. And inside of our link we'll set the name to the link text. So if we save this file, we see that we now have a mobile menu that on click it toggles. And if we go to the desktop version, we see that we have the 3-section menu with our action items on the right, our menu links in the middle, and our logo on the far left.